Tonight, history in the making. The Queen lies in rest as Scotland gathers to pay tribute to the late monarch.
I broke my heart on the telly last night. We got told she had died, and it was so emotional. I had to come today.
Thousands have gathered in Edinburgh to mark Queen Elizabeth's final moments north of the border. In extraordinary scenes along the Royal Mile, King Charles follows the procession to St Giles Cathedral. Good evening. Tonight, the Queen lies in rest in the Scottish capital. The crown of Scotland has been placed on her coffin. It is a day of history. The King and the Queen Consort have returned to Scotland. In a few moments, he will hear the condolences from the Scottish Parliament, the people's representatives. This afternoon, the late Queen was removed from the Palace of Holyrood House and taken the short distance up the Royal Mile to St Giles Cathedral. There she will lie through the night until tomorrow afternoon. Crowds have been gathering all day to file past. Shortly, we'll hear from Kellyanne at St Giles, which is playing centre stage today. But first, our senior reporter, Gordon Cree, on a day of symbolism, support and sentiment.
God bless the Queen!
King Charles III came to Edinburgh with ceremony and duty to attend and fulfil. But he did so too as a son mourning a mother. As their Majesties followed the late Queen's coffin, from every corner of the country and beyond, crowds lined the Royal Mile. They are grieving too.
I was born just before the Princess Elizabeth was crowned as Queen. And it's really moving. It's quite emotional. I could even cry talking now, yeah. I'm just so pleased I was able to see it.
I also felt like I lost someone as well. So it was a really intense feeling seeing him there. I guess that he has to fulfill his duty, but also he's trying to mourn his mother, so that requires a lot of strength.
You really feel for him because it's been such a terrible time for him, losing his mother and then having all these things to go to and things to attend to. So it's really, yeah, you really feel for him.
The length of the Queen's reign and the place of her death means no one here has ever been part of anything quite like this before, and they never will be again. It is a moment in time, but one that will last for the ages. Inside St Giles, a service of reflection and thanksgiving. The crown of Scotland was placed on the Queen's coffin as it began its period of lying in rest.
Present here are people whose lives were touched by the Queen in so many unforgettable ways. And so we gather to bid Scotland's farewell to our late monarch, whose life of service to the nation and the world we celebrate, and whose love for Scotland was legendary.
As we came on air, members of the public were due to start filing past to pay their respects. The first to be allowed in had been waiting since early this morning and told me they simply had to be here.
Because she died in Scotland, we've all got this opportunity to be here. It's an honour and a privilege. I met her at the ceremony of the Keys twice at Holyrood House, and because I worked for the Royal Regiment of Scotland, and I was also presented to her when the Queen gave the new colours to the Royal Regiment of Scotland in 2009.
When I was 19 years of age, I joined the army and I took an oath to Her Majesty, and I've stuck by that oath, even 42 years later. I was actually on night shift last night, and I'm going night shift tonight again. And I've came here.
Scotland's capital has become a focal point for the world. Joel is a student from the Philippines.
I guess, to me, I would take that as a moment to perhaps we need to thank the Lord for giving us someone like her. here in the UK, someone we deeply respect and who is like a model for all of us.
Much of the protocol today for the King involved events we've seen his mother take part in countless times. The ceremony of the keys at Holyrood Palace, where the monarch is offered the keys to the city before entrusting them back to the Lord Provost for safekeeping. There was an unscheduled moment too, an impromptu walkabout among the flowers and tributes, and a chance to meet some of those who'd come to say goodbye to the Queen. The formal engagements continue into the evening at Parliament before a return to St Giles, where the Queen's children will hold a vigil around her coffin. As they do so, the queue will take many hours to work its way through. The late Queen is no longer with us, but the people here today are still with her. Gordon Cree, STV News, Edinburgh.
Well, as Gordon said, there's so much affection for the Queen, and that's evident by the sheer size of the crowds. We'll hear more from the people who have gathered here in Edinburgh to pay their respects in a moment. But at Holyrood, there's been a series of events. The King is inside the Parliament now, and we've been hearing from party leaders across the political spectrum, united in their tributes to the late Queen. From here, her family will move back up the Royal Mile to where she lies in rest. Our political editor, Colin Mackay, can tell us more. And Colin, what's been going on in the Parliament behind us?
In the Parliament right now, the First Minister has just proposed a motion of condolence. She's just heard a response from Douglas Ross, the leader of the Conservative Party, and now Anas Sarwar, and they are paying tributes to the Queen, to the Queen's memory, to their memories of the Queen in the Scottish Parliament, but also effectively saying that they expect the King Charles to do pretty much the same. Now, the Queen was a regular visitor to the Scottish Parliament over the last 20-odd years. She's been there 10 times. And what you're seeing right now is history live. We've never seen anything like this happening before. And that's one of the things that the First Minister was talking about, that this is something that's out with all of our memories. But as I say, the Queen was last in the Scottish Parliament last year, opening the 6th session of the Scottish Parliament. And it felt like she was passing the torch on to now King Charles at that point. She said at the time that it's the people who make the place, and there are few places that's truer than in Scotland. And that kind of sums up what we've heard a lot today of the Queen's affection for Scotland. And one thing that, as the Queen's health deteriorated, one thing that was actually quite well known was the Queen actually wanted to end her days in Scotland. So if nothing else you could take from this, her final wish has been brought through, I suppose. And that's why so much of this ceremony is playing out and being held in Scotland as well, because also her death will officially be registered in Scotland too.
Well, let's hear what the First Minister has been saying.
Our nation is in mourning today for a Queen whose loss we have not yet begun to come to terms with. We are deeply honoured by the presence today of His Majesty King Charles III and the Queen Consort. Your Majesty, we stand ready to support you as you continue your own life of service and as you build on the extraordinary legacy of your beloved mother, our Queen. Queen Elizabeth, Queen of Scots, we are grateful for her life. May she now rest in peace.
So the First Minister is speaking there in that motion of condolence. What did you make of what she was saying, Colin?
I think it's quite interesting. Now, one thing that the First Minister didn't say there was she didn't refer to King Charles as the King of Scots. She did refer, however, to the Queen as Queen of Scots. And I think that's quite significant. And I think that one of the things that signifies to me is that, you know, it will take a bit of time for King Charles to be bedded in. You know, it's taken everybody a bit of time to actually learn to talk about the King rather than the Queen. The one that really made me sit up and take notice was when I heard the talk of people, of lawyers becoming King's counsels rather than Queen's counsels, which is what it's been throughout my lifetime. So I think, you know, there's things like that I think will take a little bit of bedding in. Now, what we've also heard just in the last few minutes from Douglas Ross in the Parliament was he was talking about the length of the Queen's reign meant that she had been an anchor to her history, not just across the UK, but particularly in Scotland. He was focused on that. Anas Sarwar, the Scottish Labour leader, said that she was a great unifier of our country.
So all political divisions set aside in there today?
Absolutely. I think the other thing I'm noticing that is that at the end of the speeches in the Parliament, they're all using the words "God Save the King." But as far as I'm aware,
and even there,
absolutely, just the trips off the tongue. But even there, I understand that there will be no singing of "God Save the King" at the end of this parliamentary session.
And the King himself will address the Parliament.
Absolutely, the King will respond to this. You can actually tell right now that the King is in the Parliament, because if you look at the flags just over there outside the Scottish Parliament, there's one at full mast. That's the Royal Standard of Scotland. All the others are still at half mast. Now, when the King leaves the Scottish Parliament, that will be taken down as well, and it'll go back up on Holyrood Palace when he goes back across there. OK, Colin, we'll hear more from you later. But Kellyanne has spent the day at the other end of the Royal Mile amid all the crowds who've been gathering there all day. Kellyanne, what's it been like there?
Yes, John, well, sombre earlier, but let me just give you a bit of how the day has panned out. This is where the Queen will now lie in rest for the next 24 hours. Here we witnessed a historic moment. The Queen's coffin slowly made its way up the Royal Mile, draped in the Royal Standard of Scotland and adorned by a wreath made up of roses, thistles and dried white heather from her beloved Balmoral. Her love of Scotland evident even in death. Now, behind the hearse was King Charles III on foot, along with the Queen's 3 other children. It was a sombre procession. What struck me was how quiet, calm and hushed the crowd was. All you could really hear was the gun salutes and the sound of the horses' hooves. But people here have come from far and wide to witness this piece of history. People of all ages too. In fact, I was chatting to 2 little boys who were here with their mum, and they were learning all about the Queen at school, and they were just delighted to see the King. Well, for those wanting to see the Queen's coffin, they'll need to wait just a little while longer. The barriers are being moved as we speak, but our chief reporter Sharon Frew has been speaking to people who have been waiting for hours for this moment.
Well, Kellyanne, the number of people here in the Meadows has really increased quite dramatically in the last hour. Thousands have joined this queue, which is now zigzagging through the Meadows for more than a mile. And all the people here face a very lengthy wait of many hours just to get a wristband to get inside St Giles Cathedral. The people we spoke to this morning picked up that wristband at 1 p.m. And as you said, they're only just getting access inside the cathedral to pay their respects. So people here face a very, very lengthy wait, and many have told me today they're prepared to wait here for as long as it takes to pay their respects. In the sunshine of the Meadows, they stood in line, all ages from all walks of life, waiting patiently to get a wristband that grants them access to pay their last respects.
Thank you.
Some saw this as their way of saying a personal goodbye. Among them, a former crew member from the Royal Yacht Britannia.
I was a member of the Royal Yacht Britannia all those years ago, and I come to say cheerio to the boss.
How do you think you'll feel when you step inside St Giles Cathedral today?
I know what I've got to say. I just can't wait. I loved her, and she's my boss, and like a lot of other people.
Do you want to share with us what you want to say, or do you want to keep that private?
That's for me and the boss.
Generations had travelled together as a family. Many had come prepared, but security measures meant items such as deck chairs had to be placed in storage early in their journey to St Giles.
Well, I felt I had to come and see her, getting in to pay my respects, and I've followed them through their life, and she's done such a lot. She's worked all her life, and she's been always pleasant. When you've seen her in the telly and that, she's always been pleasant. And I thought I'd come. I really wanted to come.
We've came from Glenroth SN5 today, so we've just travelled across on the train, pay our respects, hopefully see the King, the future King, well, the King now, and just sort of be part of the history of today.
Just caught the train up from North Yorkshire today to join the queue here because I signed in the army on the 20th of December 1972 and served the Queen for 40 years, so I believe I owe a big back to come and pay my respects to her.
As the hours passed, the queue slowly made its way towards the cathedral, some watching the historic events unfolding just a few streets away on their mobile phones. On the meadows, hundreds more followed the service of remembrance on a large screen. As the procession drew to a close, thousands moved from the Royal Mile to join these crowds, a queue that will grow longer into the night. Sharon Frew, STV News, Edinburgh.
Well, although all eyes are on Edinburgh today, tributes continue to be made right across the country. And our reporter Stephen Brown is at Balmoral for us just now. Stephen.
Yes, people have continued to come here and pay their respects to the Queen. They, of course, love this part of the world so much. Balmoral was really busy over the weekend, but for a period yesterday it fell silent when the Queen's coffin left from behind the gates here on that journey to Edinburgh. It passed through the nearby town, a village of Ballater, which fell silent as well to remember a much-loved neighbour and, of course, a friend as well. And we saw those images of it passing through the countryside, the hills and rivers of Aberdeenshire, and it's clear to see why the Queen did love this area so much. As it made that way towards Edinburgh, thousands lined the streets of the cities. Now, there are many messages here, but one of them simply reads, "You have done your duty, now rest in peace." Well, we've been hearing from people across Scotland today of their stories, some of them meeting the Queen, but also simply what she meant to them. As the sun shone at Balmoral this morning, still they came to pay their respects. Perhaps fewer than in days past, but still with the same sense of loss. The rows of flowers getting deeper and messages growing. Yesterday the Queen left here for the final time on her journey to Edinburgh and on to London. For those laying flowers at the gate of her Scottish home, a chance for quiet reflection.
I think it was that constant. She's always been there all our lives and our children's and grandchildren too, so it's just that end of an era.
She was a great lady. She reigned for many years, and I think the country is very sorrowful, you know.
I just feel really sad. I'm almost tearful. She was just such a wonderful, wonderful lady, and she's been Queen all my life.
Pat is 88 and still remembers seeing the Queen when she was young at Balmoral.
I've known her all my life. I stood on there when I was a small girl and watched them walking to Crathia. And they were dressed like me in a kilt and a jumper. No crown.
The main focus today may be in Edinburgh, but across the country people have continued to pay their respects to the Queen. Flowers left outside the city chambers in Glasgow as memories of her time come to the fore of people's minds.
I think I'm just echoing what everybody else is thinking as well. You know, she's always been there, she's been the constant, and now with a lot of turmoil happening in the world, knowing that she's not there, it's a big change.
Well, I was part of the Girl Guide movement as well, and she was the patron of Girl Guide and Girl Scouts, and she was a brilliant role model for young women and young girls, to be honest.
I love the Queen, she's done a good job. And she didn't deserve to go just now.
In Dundee, a book of condolences opened for people to leave their tributes, young and old coming to remember the 70 years of the Queen's reign.
I felt really sad for the whole family. To be honest, I've never been a royalist, and yet I feel it so deeply what the family have had to go through, and it was an absolute pleasure to come and sign the book.
I watched her coronation when I was a young girl of 12, and I followed her life avidly, and I just wanted to come down today and pay my respects.
It's not only in this country that people feel the loss of the Queen. In Inverness, her global impact was reflected by those who shared their memories.
She's been there my whole life, and I first remember seeing her, or my mother and dad taking me to see her when I was 6 years of age in Wollongong, Australia.
Her passing affects everyone because she was such an example.
Everybody has to say that the royal family has been a good example in general of leadership.
In the northern parts of the UK today, the Queen was also remembered. In Shetland, people paid their respects too.
The Queen was the only serving monarch that's been to Shetland since Viking times. It was a privilege to have her here, and the folk enjoyed her being here.
I think it's an extremely sad occasion. I think she's a woman that deserves a huge amount of respect for the kind of service she's given to the country for many, many, many years.
Well, it was very sad, wasn't it? And we have to celebrate her life and what she did and remember it.
I've actually met her, which makes it all the more poignant that she's passed, and she's the only Queen we've ever known. This is a completely new chapter.
What more can you say? Wonderful, wonderful woman.
Scotland is saying its final goodbyes to a Queen that loved it so much. Well, of course, there are many events happening between now and the funeral on Monday. The Queen will lie at rest at St Giles Cathedral until tomorrow evening. It will then be flown to London, accompanied by Princess Anne. It will then move to Buckingham Palace and be met by the King and the Queen consort. On Wednesday, the coffin moves to Westminster Hall, where the Queen will lie in state for 4 days. And of course, hundreds of thousands of people are expected to pay their respects. On Sunday, there will be a minute's silence across the UK at 8 p.m. On Monday, which of course has been declared as a bank holiday, the Queen's lying in state comes to an end, and of course the state funeral will be held at Westminster Abbey. The Queen will then be taken to St George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, where she will be laid to rest, and that will bring to an end the national mourning period for our longest reigning monarch.
Stephen at Balmoral, thank you. Well, the King and Queen consort will shortly be meeting some young people in the Parliament for a special reception. Meanwhile, people further back in Edinburgh are still queuing for the vigil at St Giles. So let's go back and join our reporter Sharon Frew. Sharon.
Well, I'm joined by 3 people who joined this queue just an hour ago, and in fact they've all become friends while they're waiting. Brenda, you're here from East Lothian, and I understand it's a very sad day for you because you attended the funeral of your friend earlier.
Yes, I did.
Why was it important to then come and join the queue?
Because I felt that the Queen's been part of my life all my life. I was born in June 1953, the month and year of the coronation, and I've always looked up to her. Very inspirational woman, and I just felt I had to be here, no matter how long it took and how long it's going to take. So, going to stand for the last time in Scotland.
And standing beside you is Elizabeth. You're a student at St Andrews University. Why was it important for you to also join this queue?
My mum and my aunt grew up with the Queen, so being able to honour her on their behalf when they can't be here, it's definitely very special to me.
Maria, you joined the queue an hour ago. It's a very long wait you face. Why did you want to join?
Well, the Queen is a great role model as a leader, as a woman, as also a feminist to me, and she's like the Elizabeth the Great. And also the Queen came to Indonesia. I come from Indonesia in 1974. I was 5. I remember her, and since then I follow her step. And to me, it's really a big loss, and nobody can replace her. Not a leader, with her magnitude, her fortitude, and it's really a big loss. And I'm really, really sad that she passed away. But also, I'm happy now to see back with her love, Prince Philip and her mom. So basically, to me, it's the only way to be present, actually, to queue and to give the last respect to her.
Well, thank you very much, ladies. I'll let you all join your places in the queue. They will face a very, very lengthy wait, but as we said earlier, many people determined to be here, but they do face a very, very long night.
Sharon, thank you. Well, let's go to the front of that queue again, and here's Kellyanne.
Well, John, since I last spoke, the queue has been allowed through the barrier. You can perhaps see people moving slowly through. The people right at the start of that queue have been queuing since during the night. The queue to file past the Queen's coffin is about 2 miles long, we understand. And if you know Edinburgh, that will stretch right back to the Meadows. Now, the Queen lived a life of service and earned so much respect. Now, all the people here want to do is to show their respect.
He's paraphrasing. He's not quoting. Well, in the last few moments, the King has been speaking in the Parliament, responding to that motion of condolence, and he referred to Burns.
It was the greatest comfort for her to know, in turn, the true affection in which she was held. The knowledge of that deep and abiding bond must be to us a solace as we mourn the end of a life of incomparable service. If I might paraphrase the words of the great Robert Burns, my dear mother was the friend of man, the friend of truth, the friend of age and guide of youth. Few hearts like hers with virtue warmed, few heads with knowledge so informed.
The King speaking in the Scottish Parliament for the first time. What did you make of that, Colin?
Well, he spoke just a few minutes ago, and one of the most important things I think he said was that he wants to follow the inspiring example that his mother set in terms of her integrity, in terms of the amount of work. He also said that the family takes great comfort from the affection that she was held by the Scottish people. He met the First Minister earlier for an audience. He's meeting young people in the Scottish Parliament right now. They'll be coming out quite soon. And what you're essentially seeing right now is history live and in the making. See the people who are all gathered over there. They're not just there for love of the Queen or for respect of the Queen. They're there also because they want to be part of history. And that's what we're seeing here in the Scottish Parliament today. That was the first time King Charles now has spoken in the Scottish Parliament, but it won't be the last.
Colin, thank you. Well, these have been a remarkable last few days in Scotland since the Queen died at Balmoral last Thursday. A drama most of us have never seen, and Scotland has been at the heart of it. We may never have seen it, but there have been tributes and rituals that were never part of the country before. But this place has seen this history before. Palace of Holyrood House, the Royal Mile, St Giles. These stones are steeped in history, and today is another day for the ages. From all of us across Scotland, good night.
She set an example of selfless duty, which, with God's help and your counsels, I am resolved faithfully to follow.
Chanai mi pas ach madam bio is ich moi prenie rams mach ich dir mi ach gepas hatu ke hadish mi
And so we gather to bid Scotland's farewell to our late monarch, whose life of service to the nation and the world we celebrate, and whose love for Scotland was legendary.
Is